the second thing I'd like to do is thank, first of all, Supervisor Miley's office and the United Seniors of Oakland and Alameda County for really being partners with us in this really important census work. They have been supporting our convenings of our senior subcommittee, and the work of that subcommittee is to ensure that we work with our organizations and advocates and service providers of seniors so that we can make sure that all of our seniors in Alameda County have access to Census 2020, which is critically important for the reasons that I am going to discuss right now. So, as during my introduction, my name is Alessia Simmonds. I'm the Outreach Manager for the Alameda County Complete Count Committee. The County Census Office was set up as an initiative championed by our Board of Supervisors, who did two really important things in addition to setting up our team. One, they allocated $1.5 million to ensure that all of our hard-to-count communities in Alameda County are included in next year's census count. And they also formally opposed the proposed citizenship question, which is slated to, thank you, yes, absolutely, which is slated to actually encourage an undercount, which would be devastating for our community. So moving on to the next slide, it's the second slide, you're still on the first page of your handout. I would like to just talk about what the census is. It's a brief civics lesson. A census is actually mandated by our Constitution. Every 10 years we have to do a count of every single person in the country, regardless of who you are, regardless of citizenship status, so on and so forth. These data that are derived from this count are critically important in that they determine the allotment of congressional seats, so our political representation, as well as critical funding that comes back to our communities. As you can see on the slide, we, as Alameda County, actually get more than half of our resources for all of these critical programs from the federal and state resources, which are determined by census data. So when you talk about transportation and affordable housing, the way in which they get funded is by using census data. So critically important to all of our work. Unfortunately, there are thousands of residents in Alameda County who are considered hard to count. Each person missed in the count equates to about $2,000 lost per person per year for 10 years. Alright, so that's about $20,000 for each person that we missed, and the people who are hard to count actually make up 26% of our population. And if we undercount by only 3%, the county would lose $1 billion over 10 years. And of course, people who are considered hard to count are those who are distrustful of the government, our senior communities who might not have access to internet and who might be locked in their homes, et cetera, et cetera. So really critically important that we all work together to make sure that everyone has access to the census. So as you can see, the stakes are really high for census next year to ensure that we have a complete count. We are working with the United Seniors of Oakland and Alameda County to make sure that this specific group has access. On the next slide, you will see, which is slide 3, you will see all of the programs whose funding is allocated by census data. As I mentioned, transportation, affordable housing. Also, healthcare is actually the largest piece of the pie that gets allocated from census data. And then in addition to healthcare, it's programs that have health benefits, such as SNAP, food stamps, and then the Women, Infants, and Children program, and so on and so forth. So, why are we concentrating so much county resources and effort on Census 2020, ensuring a complete count? On the following slide that's titled Census 2020 is Radically Different, it spells out the multitude of challenges that we're actually going to face. The first is fear and distrust of government that's worsened by the current political climate, will make it very difficult to get our census messages heard. Public policies that have been put in place that undermine our immigrant communities, like the Muslim ban, public charge, family separation, the list really goes on. And additionally, the administration has added a proposed question on citizenship that's being litigated at the Supreme Court right now, which will greatly deter participation if it is. One of the studies I read actually showed that about 5 million people are predicted to be missed, to not want to fill out the fill out the form because the citizenship question is on there. And as I mentioned before, if we only undercount by 3%, we would lose $1 billion over 10 years. In addition to fear and distrust of the government, it's the first digital census. This census is going to be conducted primarily online due to decreases in funding. The Census Bureau has to spend half as many resources this time around as it did in 2010, and arguably 2010 was a much friendlier climate to actually conduct a census. So their resources have been halved, and a lot of seniors, as you all know, don't know how to use the computer, don't have access, don't have computer literacy or Wi-Fi or anything like that. So it's really important that we work with our organizations to figure out how best to make sure that we're connecting with all of our seniors. In addition to this being a first digital census, there are going to be language barriers. So there are several languages that are not covered by the census. For example, in Alameda County, there's Mom and some other languages that are spoken that will not be provided at all. The census form itself is only going to be provided in English and Spanish, that's on paper, and then online it'll be available in 12 languages as well as English, and then 59 languages in only video and glossary guides. So making sure that people can actually access those guides. Language access is actually a part of our outreach plan, so we're working with our community partners to make sure that we are providing those languages that are not available in any form by the census to our communities in need. There are 3 ways that you can actually take the census. I mentioned the census is going to be conducted primarily online. However, you will also have the opportunity to call the Census Bureau and provide your answers that way, as well as receive a paper form. If you ignore the census sort of prompts to get you to fill out your form online, the Census Bureau is actually going to mail you a form. But again, the form only comes in English and Spanish, and only in Spanish if you meet a threshold of monolingual Spanish speakers in your community. So, staying on the same slide, the part that's sort of highlighted as Census Outreach grant funding opportunities available. Given all of these challenges that we're going to face in Alameda County, we are looking to focus the $1.5 million that the Board of Supervisors allocated to our office to get that out into the community through outreach grants. It's going to be a simple RFP. It'll be available later this year to support census outreach, whether it's having questionnaire assistance centers at your organizations, or literally going door to door to your neighbors to, encourage them to fill out the census, answer their questions, et cetera, et cetera. And we're working with our senior subcommittee to sort of come up with what that will look like. What is the best way to interact with our seniors and get them access? In addition to grants, there's going to be mini grants for organizations that they might have limited capacity or only want to do like a one-time event, for example, to support census taking or census information. That will be an even easier, even simpler RFP to get those mini grants. So we're really trying to be comprehensive of all of our communities and all of our organizations' abilities and needs. So moving on to the next slide, our timeline. So just sort of high-level overview of where we are. In 2019, we are in our education and planning phase. We are building and educating our community, building our coalition, getting organizations signed on to this work, really getting the message out there that our community counts, our community belongs, and all of our organizations and advocates in Alameda County have a role to play in ensuring outreach is done respectfully and appropriately in our communities. Next year we're going to be in our awareness phase, meaning all of the tools and materials and everything that we came up with in our education planning phase will be implemented. And we're starting to get those messages out to the general public that the census is coming, there's something that you need to do, you're going to get a postcard in the mail, et cetera, so that people actually know what to expect and that they don't throw out their really important mail that comes from the Census Bureau that unfortunately looks a lot like junk mail. And then in March of 2020 is when the census becomes live and we actually are, ready to take our census. All of our questionnaire assistance centers are open. We have census ambassadors signed up to, really go out there and make sure that everyone gets counted. So moving on to the next slide, I do want to talk a little bit about measures that the Census Bureau is taking to protect your data. Given that it's a first online census, cybersecurity and data privacy are going to be very important. So they are taking steps to ensure that all the data that's put on the online platform is encrypted, and they're actually buying up other websites that could possibly look like the census website. Also, Title 13 of the U.S. Code says that the Census Bureau cannot share any of your personally identifiable information with any other government agency. So they can't share it with ICE, the FBI, the President, they can't share it with Housing Authority, because, obviously if you have, people living in a legal unit in your home, or whatever the case is, we want to let our communities know that it's okay to respond to the census. No one's going to come and say, you're out of code. So really important to let our partners know that. So moving on to the next slide about the proposed citizenship question. I want to take a little bit of time on this because I know it is a very important issue and a lot of people have concerns about this question. So on the form, on the slide itself, you will see what the question will look like in the instance that it does appear on the census. As I mentioned previously, the census question is being litigated at the Supreme Court level, and we'll actually hear back probably by the end of this month what the Supreme Court decides, whether to allow this question to appear on the census or that it's unconstitutional because of procedural things that they did not actually go through, et cetera, et cetera. So, the Asian Law Caucus is, their contact information is noted here on this slide. They are sort of acting as a resource for legal information and legal advice should anyone have questions about this citizenship question, like can I skip a question, what happens if I answer the question, et cetera, et cetera. Because we at the county, obviously we're not lawyers, and we want to make sure that we're connecting people with this organization who can actually provide that legal advice should the question appear on the census, and it's something that we actually have to really work with. So, moving on to my very last slide, I'm sure that I've gone over my time, so apologies for that. I just want to say that there are several ways that you can participate right now. As I mentioned before, we have a senior subcommittee. So if you want to give your feedback on, why seniors might have a hard time filling out the census, what are the barriers, what are the best ways to sort of interact with seniors and make sure that they have access to the census, we are open to any and all suggestions and ideas. The purpose of the subcommittee is really to work in community to inform our plan. So we have those, and we're looking to schedule our next subcommittee in July. Which will be hosted by United Seniors of Oakland and Alameda County. Right. So that's great. Also, you can become a census messenger. So I have this purple sheet up here if anyone is interested. What it says is that you agree to share our census information with your, or through your networks. So one really big piece of our work is working through trusted messengers to inform people about the importance of the census and that they need to take it. Obviously, we are, just a sort of pop-up government shop who's here only to do census outreach work, but you all are the ones who have those real authentic relationships with the community. So we would love to have people sign on to our messenger program to really help us to inform folks that this is something that is very critically important for all the reasons that I noted earlier. Also, as I mentioned, we have our Census Ambassador program. You can come and sign on. This program will be available later this year. And it's pretty much saying, hey, I can reach X amount of people who are considered hard to count in my community, and I really want to help. So then you would fill out our application, and then we would get you all of the resources that you need to do that outreach. So materials, we're looking to develop a t-shirt to make you look really official as you're going door to door. And just really provide you with everything that you need to be effective, and also, of course, training on how to let people know about census and why it's important and answer their questions, etc. And then, as I mentioned also, there are going to be outreach grants available, mini grants available, and then county materials will be available later this year as well. And thank you so much for having me, and I will pass it along to Randy.